So it turns out I have a lot more to say about games designed by women. Prepare thyselves. So there's this great article that's being shared around social media. It's called the male glance. And this is compared to the male gaze, which was a term invented by Laura Mulvey, a feminist film critic, where basically she describes the camera representing only the male gaze. So when a camera looks at a woman or looks at a man, it would look at them as though they were a man. So that's what the male gaze is. So this article is about the male glance. I've previously talked about games being designed by women being for everyone, not just women, and how important it is, especially for dudes, to buy and play these games, because you are the dominant voice, power, and money in role-playing games. So whatever you support is going to be what's big, what's trending, and what inevitably makes money. So, you know, you get to decide where your money goes in a way that is more relevant and even more one-on-one than like going out to watch, you know, the new Ghostbusters or Wonder Woman or Black Panther, right? Because like we want to support things that star women and are made by women. But if you apply this to role-playing games, it's like a very small group of people compared to movies. And so literally your money is directly going to them. And I know that a lot of you do this already and a lot of you support me too, and I am super grateful for all that you do. You know, while you might think this isn't for you, this still is for you. It's still for me. I'm partially talking to myself when I'm talking about this stuff too, because I also have internalized misogyny, which I will talk about later. So back to the male glance article. So the article talks about how, I think it's Showtime, I'm terrible, go look at the article, and how they put out 2 shows at the same time starring buddy detectives. And one of them was called Doll and M, which apparently I had never even heard of it, which says how much this is ingrained in our culture. You know, it has brilliant commentary on women in this type of genre that like goes back to The Godfather and Sunset Boulevard. I mean, I love Sunset Boulevard. This sounds amazing. So I would totally watch this if I had heard of it. And versus juxtaposed against the dude buddy detective show, which was True Detective. So this says a lot. I mean, I'm a True Detective fan. I loved it. I love genre, you know, it kind of fits into like a Twin Peaks horror, Lovecraftian type thing, and that's totally my jam. I love sci-fi and horror. But I also really love classic film, and especially classic film that stars women or is made by women. And so this other show sounds right up my alley too. So like, why had I never heard of it? The article says, to be explicit, the show about boys got way too much credit and the show about girls got way too little. This is a historical narrative. We're conditioned to view media made by women as less talented, less technically good, especially if it has feminine coding. I'm lucky. I've been exposed to this idea for a while. I studied art all throughout school and then went to art school for college. And I learned about the Guerrilla Girls and their campaigns to get more women art in museums. If you've never heard of them, look them up. They're amazing. I fell in love with Frida Kahlo, Jenny Holzer, Marina Abramovic, and just like all these women artists that I had never heard about probably before college. A lot of people have this experience, especially women. Like, you get you go take your feminist 101 and then you're like, oh, whoa, my worldview I've been brainwashed. Why did I never look at things this way before? You know, and I began to understand the struggle of, you know, that women artists have of getting their art into the curated world, you know, basically into the salon, into museums, and basically thought of as awesome as male art. And, you know, before then I hadn't given much thought about whose media I had been consuming. It just what it was, you know. I really, like I said, I love genre. I love sci-fi, I love fiction. Fantasy's okay. Sorry, gamers. And, you know, a lot of that stuff really sparked my imagination when I was younger. And so I read a lot of it, I watched a lot of it, I consumed video games that contained it, but I never really thought about who was making it. And a lot of that is driven by pop culture. You know, culture in America often hides things that are not made by men. It doesn't get as big because of all of this ingrained systemic stuff. So I learned how to go out of my way to try and consume media that was made by not men. You know, maybe it's queers, maybe it's, you know, lady creators or women, music, movies, books, and, you know, finally games. But it's a long road. I mean, like, just this year, I made it my summer reading goal, or last year, I guess, to read sci-fi that wasn't written by men. And so I was reading, for the first time, Octavia Butler and Ursula K. Le Guin. I read Ancillary Justice, which I absolutely loved. It's, like, so me. And, you know, I love William Gibson, don't get me wrong. But I hadn't really thought about reading women's sci-fi before, and that's silly given how much time I used to spend in libraries. So men, it's not just you, it's everyone. We've all been indoctrinated into this culture, into believing culture has told us about who makes good things, and it's men, not women. So I'm going to read another outtake from the article, which I think is really great. A famous Susan Sontag meditation on this aesthetic paradigm bears repeating. The great advantage men have is that our culture allows two standards of male beauty, the boy and the man. The beauty of a boy resembles the beauty of a girl. In both sexes, genders, it is a fragile kind of beauty and flourishes naturally only in the early part of life cycle. Happily, men are able to accept themselves under another standard of good looks, heavier, rougher, more thickly built. There is no equivalent of this second standard for women. The single standard of beauty for women dictates that they must go on having clear skin. Every wrinkle, every line, every gray hair is a defeat. And so she goes on to say, if our ability to see detail in a woman's face is magnified by our visual habits, our ability to see complexity in a woman's story is diminished by our reading habits. So culture teaches us to criticize, analyze, objectify, and lessen the things that women do in a way that it doesn't do to men, be that aging, beauty, or, you know, their writing. And it's because we're the other. Queer women, women of color, disabled women are even further othered. We have like the double or triple other sometimes. So to give you a little feminism 101 real quick, othered in the gender sense means other than a man. So that's kind of what othered means. You can also other straightness, right? So straight is the status quo, queer is othered, and you can do it with race, ableism, all kinds of things. So it's not just limited to gender, but I am talking about it in a gendered sense right now. Just a quick aside, I don't know if you can see my pin, but it does say fix your hearts or die. And it's a awesome transpositive, I don't know, quote from David Lynch in Twin Peaks: The Return. Watch that. Also, if you get this pin, you can like support trans rights and stuff. Not that I'm like sponsored to say that, I just think it's cool and it's an awesome pin, so. Okay, aside over. So, back to the male glance. So the male glance is the opposite of the male gaze. Rather than linger on the parts it most wants to penetrate, i.e. the woman's body or the man's body, whatever it is, it looks and then it assumes and then it just moves on. So when relying on this intuition of glancing, the male glance will assume that something that's made by a woman isn't for them. This goes back to my other video where I think one of the biggest problems in RPGs is that a glance at something made by a woman or a subject that might seem feminine is all that it takes to define what is for me and what isn't for me. It means that, you know, women games are okay, but they're not the public. They are a niche within the RPG community, and they're certainly not the norm, right? So in that sense, game designers who are women or who are not men, we end up being outsiders in our own medium. So women game designers are othered in a landscape of men game design. So when we look at a girl's story, we often can't see beyond our own expectations or our own generic understanding of how the world works. So, you know, that's how she gives the example in the article. The Disney film Brave got dismissed as just another princess film. And even Mark Twain dismissed Jane Austen's work as not being high arts because he couldn't understand that she was making her characters unlikable on purpose. He just thought she was a bad writer. And so we do this with women designed games as well. I've done it myself, you know. Sometimes I'll look at something and be like, ugh, Jane Austen, that sounds too girly. And like I've said, you know, I don't tend to like necessarily traditionally feminine coded things. And so, you know, I like sci-fi and horror, feminine coded things. My feminine coding ends up a little bit on the hard femme side. So, but, you know, when I take the time to actually sit down and play it, usually the game is great. There will be really awesome and well thought out mechanics. You know, the story is wonderful. It creates fantastic play at the table. And suddenly I'm tricked into liking a genre that I didn't even like girly stuff. And that's not to say that all women designed games are girly, right? But we've been over this before. In the same way that I made it a point to read sci-fi written by women over the summer, I've made it a point over, I don't know, the past several years, since I really started getting into indie gaming probably, to kind of search out games that were designed by women, games that weren't the status quo, so that I could kind of understand that perspective a little bit more. Because for a long time, I was doing that same thing. I was just dismissing a game if it seemed too girly or too feminine. So even I am guilty of the male glance, like I said earlier. And you know, it's really important that those games exist. So back to Laura Mulvey and, you know, the male gaze. She said, "It is always possible that the female spectator may find herself so out of key with the pleasure on offer, with its masculinization, that the spell of fascination is broken. When we are just spectators in a genre or in industry as far as designing games goes, you know, we get sick of trying to pretend that we're men or identifying with the male identity, male feelings, male adventures." I'm saying male and female instead of men and women, just as shorthand. But remember, there's male and female is sex, not gender. So a lot of women just don't play role-playing games because they don't enjoy the pleasure of being othered so hard, you know? And it's the same with designing. You know, I think it's hard for a lot of women to break into game design and do successful stuff because we're always the other designer, other than the man. And when women's stories are dismissed as girly or niche, or not for everyone, i.e. not for men, who men are the everyone in this example, you know, the complexity and beauty that is in those games is just never even given a chance. It's just glanced at and dismissed. So what we need to do is really take a close look and remember and acknowledge this male glance. Like, acknowledge that it's there, acknowledge that we all do it, even if we're not a man, because we all have internalized misogyny. And, you know, we have to not do this with games designed by women. We have to not dismiss them just because they're designed by a woman. We have to actually give them extra support. We need to go out of our way to support, promote, and buy games designed by women, to kind of begin to get over this concept that only men's games can be that good or that big. And this is including me. I have to yell at my internalized misogyny all the time. It's like this monster voice, not a cool monster, like a bad monster that's like in my head that's telling me that women are less than. And that's including me, because I am a woman. And I have learned that women create subpar things too. I've like internalized this narrative, this cultural narrative that we all have. And you know, that women design games can't be classics, and women designers can't be as genius as men designers are. I need to get rid of that all the time. Like, I have to do double work, like not only for other women or other not men, but also for myself. So the next time you're faced with, you know, supporting a game designer's work, a game designer who is not a man, you know, on social media, spreading the word, promoting what they're doing, taking a look at the actual games that they've created, remember not to just glance at it. Take a deeper dive. Really look at what it is that's being created and that has been made. And don't let the lies that culture has told you about gender and the gender of these amazing artists and designers, you know, don't let culture tell you what to think about them. Think about it yourself and look past that cultural gender brainwashing, basically. And as always, thank you so much. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell if you want to stay up to date on what I'm making all the time. Share it on your social media, get it out there. I'm almost at 100 subscribers. I'm super stoked to get my own URL. That's the cool thing that happens. And if you want to support me, you can do it on my Patreon, where I'm designing experimental analog games. And that's where I made my most recent game, A Cozy Den, about lesbian snakes, which is pretty feminine coded. Don't just glance at it. Take a look and read it. It's got some pretty awesome stuff in there. I'll see you next video. Thanks so much, everyone.